Welcome to the Why Music podcast, where we talk to independent artists about their journeys, the inspirations behind their music, and ultimately why they make music. This next artist is a one man indie rocker who doubles as a free spirited songwriter. Influenced by the sounds of the 70s with some ear candy flavor of the 60s, he's like a true cross between modern artist and an old soul. Welcome, John.
Hi, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing very well, thanks. Doing very well. It's getting a little bit getting a little bit warmer, so hopefully we're through the terribly cold weather that we've had last week.
Yeah, it's been a cold winter, more cold than it has been the past few years. So,
Yeah.
I always like to start with where your music journey all began.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, my earliest musical memories are me riding around in the back seat of my mom's station wagon, listening to Beatles cassettes. Um, and I just remember like staring out the window and thinking about how each song was its own little world, and there was like such a magic to that, being like a little kid and having no idea um, how they were making these sounds. And I just remember the personality of each one of those songs and just thinking it was so amazing, and thinking, I don't know how they do that, but I want to figure it out.
Yeah. Um, especially if like Beatles is where you start, that's just kind of a next level like, whoa, what's
Yeah.
going on here? Um, so how kind of from there, like, did you then pick up an instrument? Did you start singing? Like, where did you kind of go from being this curious consumer to being the man behind the guitar?
Yeah, it was an interesting journey because that was like a very early obsession for me, like before kindergarten or preschool or anything. um I was listening to those cassettes and so into it and so sure that that's what I was going to do as I got older. And then for whatever reason it just completely left my life, and I like didn't really have any interest in music for the longest time, until I turned 11. And to be very honest, again, my mom was just kind of bugging me about getting more involved in extracurricular activities. And she said, well, you can play the guitar, and we can just sign you up for 1 month, and if you don't like it you can cancel. So in the back of my mind, I didn't communicate this to her, but I was like, perfect, I will sign up for 1 month, cancel, and then I can get back to playing video games. But needless to say, here I am a couple decades later, and I'm still playing guitar. I loved it, and it was a really fun challenge.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes your arm just has to get twisted in the right way to, light that fire again.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I almost like when I was in like fifth grade, they did the like go ahead and try out an instrument, see if you want to like be in band or orchestra or whatever. So I
Hmm.
went down and I was like, okay, I kind of like the cello's kind of calling my name here. I was like, that kind of could be the vibe. I went home that day. My mom's like, didn't you want to take piano lessons? And I was like, oh, right. Yeah, that. And then I went and did piano lessons instead of doing the orchestra. And I'm sure that things would have gone much differently for me if I hadn't started with piano instead. So sometimes
Yeah.
you just need somebody to kind of point you back in the right direction or kind of force you into that direction, whether you like it or not. And just, it's just like when you tell yourself you're going to do something just for like 5 minutes, you end up doing it for longer. But it's like, it's that like limited promise that gets you there. And then the rest just kind of happens.
Absolutely. And it's funny that you mentioned that, the cello and doing orchestra at school, because the same year, fifth grade, was also when we had to pick an instrument to play in school, and I chose trumpet, and I could not have cared less about the trumpet. So I started trumpet and guitar at the same time, and I just spent all my time playing guitar, and absolutely 0% of it playing trumpet.
Hey, but looking at where we are now, like clearly that worked out for you. So that
Absolutely.
1 month trial was big.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then how kind of from there did you start writing music and turn just being a guitarist into being a songwriter and then ultimately being an artist?
Yeah. So I mean, my only goal was really to play guitar at the beginning, and I was very into like very riff based hard rock and heavy metal and and classical music. For me it was all about uh what's the hardest thing to play and can I play it. That was like I treated it very much like a game or a sport in the beginning. And I was in bands all throughout high school and middle school. Um, and I used it in a very, in almost unartistic way at first. But I think that's the way a lot of, teenage boys, that's kind of how their brains work for a certain while. And then we had an opportunity in high school to do a internship, and all the practical folks did an internship. I don't know, at a finance firm or a lawyer's office or construction or something like that. But there was an option to make your own course, and myself and my band decided that we were going to write and record an EP. So for the last month of high school, we did that, and that was my first exposure to, uh, writing and recording my own music, um, and that kind of lit the spark. And then through college, I was too busy to really do any of it, and I was just in gigging bands, playing around campus and around some of the bars there, and frat parties and college parties and stuff like that. Um, and then after college, I just I was so obsessed with the Beatles again. It kind of had come full circle. Um, I didn't abandon heavy metal and hard rock and that stuff. I still love that stuff, but I got re-obsessed with the Beatles, and I just said I want to write a Beatlesque album, and so I did, and I put that out, um, and that led to two other EPs that kind of shifted genre a little bit, but we're still within the indie rock lane. Um, and then I just over COVID, I got absolutely obsessed with country music. I watched Ken Burns's country music documentary, and so since then, I've been writing country music, and I hope to very soon record some of that stuff and put that out under my name, and kind of treat my artist name and my artist project as kind of just an expression of whatever I want to do. Um, and for right now, that's country music, and I'm writing songs that I think are not for me and that I think are more for a commercial market as well. Um, so it's been quite an evolution.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds like it. When, I was reading your bio and everything prior to this, and I was like, I remember from the writers round, I was like, I thought you had kind of more of a country thing kind of going on, and then you were like self-proclaimed like into the rock and all that, and I was like, okay, like I could kind of see that right on that cusp, and I was like,
Yeah,
I feel like we're leading with country here, and then I that makes perfect sense is that you've kind of
yeah,
shifted into that gear more so. So I mean, yeah, there's no real like limit to what you can and can't do. Country and rock aren't like all that different. You can kind of dance that line pretty easily. It's not like going from like country to like EDM.
right,
That might be an interesting twist.
yeah,
But no, I mean that's and it's good that you're like just doing it because that's kind of, that's what's calling and that's, what's drawing to you. because some people I feel like get caught up in the this is what I've been doing, this is, where I've put myself. I have to do what I can to like stay there. But really it's like then you lose what's real to you. You lose that like passion for it and it's just follow whatever it is that's calling.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that that's getting stuck in a genre or feeling like you're, I don't know, abandoning your audience or something like that. I feel like so much of that is, at least in today's age, it's based in this bizarre desire to serve some algorithm and to maximize your reach in that way. Not to say that this wasn't an issue in the past. I mean, Dylan for sure got a lot of flack. It's just that his algorithm wasn't on a computer. It was, through word of mouth, and there were so many folks who were just outraged when he picked up an electric guitar, right? But if you think of the philosophies of artists like the Beatles or like David Bowie, you know, they David Bowie constantly was reinventing himself, and he didn't start a new band, he didn't start a new project. It was just, I'm David Bowie and this is where I am right now. And I feel like, that's the same philosophy that I'm kind of working with. I'm John Marland, and yeah, in September I put out a psychedelic indie rock EP. But I've been writing country music, and that's what I want to put out coming up next, and that's what I'm doing in Nashville. With these writers rounds and the songwriting that I'm doing down here. Um, so I always, I've always really respected that, and I think that that's an open-minded way to create.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that you have to do what feels right. Otherwise, there will be some sort of disconnect either within you or that will be like transferred into the music itself of just like you're not getting that. Like even though we're going from this psychedelic rock project to something more country, like it still has that like you part of it. But if you were to like
Yeah,
lock yourself into where things were and just kind of force yourself to write like you have been and stay in that lane, then that you part of it gets pulled away because that's not what you were called to. So and I think genres, I mean, I hate the whole concept of it to some degree because it's like, 100 different pop artists could have 100 completely different sounds. And, there's a lot of variance there and how it like there's so much that's blended together these days. Like there's so many people that walk the line of like three different genres at the same time,
yeah,
that it's hard to address it without feeling like it's like, discrediting the other elements of it. Like saying you're pop, but also rock is like if you just, when you put that word on it, it almost takes away from the others. So but yeah, I mean, you have to just make the music that makes sense.
yeah,
That's all there is
absolutely.
to it. What do you find most often inspires your writing?
Hmm. That is a great question. Um, these days uh, it's it's a title, um, and it's just sitting down and doing it. I think that in the past I used to wait for divine inspiration, and I've found that that is uh, no longer something that really works for me. Um, I have a whole list of titles, and I go for a long walk and something just pops into my head, and then I just make the time and I sit down and I say I'm writing this song today. Whether I finish it or not, is always kind of up for grabs. But I think just really dedicating yourself to sitting down and doing the work.
Have you ever had it like if you're working off of a title and like maybe there's like an initial sort of like vibe of like I think that this song is kind of going to be like about this thing or telling like this kind of story or conveying a certain point. Have you ever
Mhm.
had it where once you then actually sit down with it, it turns out completely different than what maybe that initial idea was?
Absolutely. All the time. And that actually used to bother me because I would have a song and then I would have an idea about what it was going to be like, and then I sat down to write it and something else came out, and I found that like distressing. I felt that I had like somehow betrayed,
Betrayed yourself?
myself or the original idea, and then I just kind of decided like to stop anthropomorphizing ideas, and just let them be, because there's always another song idea, there's always another song title, and if you didn't write the song that you thought you were going to write, you will tomorrow.
Yeah. Or that song just wasn't meant to be. Maybe
Or
that
that.
idea wasn't meant to be discussed and this other one was.
Yeah, that happens all the time too.
Um, if you had to create your own genre around your style of music, what are we calling it?
Ooh. uh um I'm gonna go with hard psychedelic outlaw country rock, in parentheses rock.
I like that you added the outlaw part. Like where is that like just like I'm not that well versed in the country world. Is that like a
Mhm.
form of country or like psychedelic rock is a form of rock or is that just like
Yeah,
a personal
it's
tag?
no, it's a soft subgenre. Outlaw country kind of includes guys like Merle Haggard, Waylon Jennings, Hank Williams Jr. Um, but I mean, really, it's it was kind of a reaction to the very pretty sounding produced country music with strings that was coming out of Nashville in the 60s and 70s, and this had more of a rough and tumble, stripped down vibe, and it wasn't about, you know it wasn't love songs. It was more about, outlaws and bad behavior, um, which I think is almost always interesting in a song.
You could almost drop the country and rock from that and just go full blown psychedelic outlaw and
Hard
just leave it at
psychedelic
that.
outlaw. Yeah, 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 absolutely.
Yeah. It's got a nice little ring to it. We don't need a country and rock. That's old news. We're
Yeah,
claiming new categories here.
let's leave them behind. You're right.
Yeah. Is there a song that you've written that you think best embodies who you are as an artist?
Hmm.
Your one song sample of like, if you like this, you'll like the rest. Something that kind of gives somebody a sense of who you are as an artist in one song, as hard as that is.
Uh, I think that's very hard. I don't know that boy. I'm trying to think of something that can meld the two. Uh, I guess if we're talking about something that's recent, that's unreleased, that has kind of the rock and the country and a bit of the psychedelia, at least from a topic perspective, I've written a song called Tennessee Sober, and it's kind of an answer to a Billy Strings and Willie Nelson song called California Sober. Um, so I would say that song, um, as far as something that you can go out there and listen to right now, that's on Spotify and iTunes and all that stuff. Um, I would probably say you should check out the song Megan on my latest EP, The Offering Tree. I did not write that song. However, um, I wrote all the guitar parts, the fills and the solos, and I managed to work in, some jam band stuff. There's like a long extended solo at the end, and even some country sounding bends into it. So that gives you a cool mix of psychedelia and the classic rock stuff, and a little bit of country as well.
I was gonna ask for a like tangible one that's existing on the platforms, so I'm
Yeah,
glad that you beat me to
yeah,
it. But yeah, no, I especially being in this like transitive place of like I did this and now I'm doing this,
yeah,
picking something, probably not the easiest task,
yeah,
but you gave both sides. You gave
yeah,
both the psychedelic and the outlaw.
absolutely.
That's all we can ask for. If you had to pick two or three artists that you think your music is like a combination of, who would
Sure.
it be?
Um, Gotta say the Beatles. I'm gonna say Bowie. Um, as I think if you listen to the three releases that I have out on streaming platforms, you can hear more and more kind of hard glam influences in the later two EPs. Um, and a third influence, I'm going to go with Elliott Smith.
What about those three? Like, what elements of those three artists then do you think show through, I guess, in your music?
Yeah, so I'm going to say, the Beatles, harmony, chord changes, changing key, um, and trying to make those musically complex elements sound catchy and simple. That's the Beatles. Um, Bowie, the Bowie influence is very like Ziggy Stardust, Hunky Dory, Aladdin Sane, the glam rock era. I don't think there's a cooler sound on planet Earth than a distorted electric guitar. So anytime you hear that, I'm thinking about those three Bowie records, um, and the guitar playing that's on those records. That's all the Bowie influence. And Elliott Smith, I just, he was very influenced by the Beatles, but he's got a little bit more of a depressive subject matter. So, and I'm not sure that I'm capable of writing a truly positive song. Um, I think I get out of neutral at best. So that's the Elliott Smith.
The dark tones, the
Yes,
overarching dark tones.
yes,
I get that. It's hard to write happy music. It's because
it
like
really is.
it's a lot of it. It's just like people use music like songwriting as like this like coping mechanism, and it's like I
Yeah,
don't have to cope with being happy. You
no,
know, like I'm just gonna enjoy that. Let me have fun with that. It's the
exactly.
darker days that we're like, okay, here's how we're dealing with it, and then that's when the
Yeah,
songs come out.
and it is really really hard to not sound corny and write a happy song.
Right.
That
You have
is
to dance a
so
fine
challenging.
line. Yeah.
It's so hard. I
Yeah.
really tried on my first record, but you can listen to it. It just gets more and more depressing as it goes because I had to give up. I only had like two or three of those tunes in me.
And it's almost, I feel like it's almost evil when when artists like package the negative, the dark songs in like more upbeat and happier packaging. And it's like it's like by the time verse two hits, you're like, wait a minute. I'm not
Yeah,
supposed to be enjoying this. Like this is supposed to be emotionally affecting me.
yeah. But I do think that there's a very interesting argument for making a dark subject matter palatable in that way. I think Pumped Up Kicks is like an incredible example of that because
Fair
if
enough.
you write that song and it's a slow ballad, that song is not being played on the radio,
That's
you
fair.
know.
That's fair. That's fair. That's yeah, that is definitely a good example of that for sure. Um, this is where I take a question from last week's artist for this week's artist. So the question from last week is, what is a hard lesson that you've had to learn as an artist, and then how has it helped you?
I think I think the hard lesson that I had to learn, and I kind of spoke about this a little bit earlier, uh, is, and this is a little general, but just letting go. And I think I mean that in a lot of ways. I think I mean that from a songwriting perspective, um, and a recording perspective. Um, I I think that in my earlier days, I took way too long to write songs that I shouldn't have tried to finish. Uh, and like I said, I waited too much for the perfect line, the perfect thing, and I was unable to kind of throw away things that didn't work. And the same thing for recording because I've done most of the tracking except for drums all by myself, and my natural tendency is to be a perfectionist. And if you want to get something done, that's just not a realistic expectation for yourself as a musician. We are imperfect beings.
Yeah. Yeah. And you want it to be good, but good doesn't have to be perfect. Especially because, like,
Absolutely.
and I always find when recording, it's hard to judge it in a like valuable way
Mm,
when it's like the first thing you're putting in the track. When it's like you just hear like the guitar by itself, it's like I there's just something like I just don't like it. But then it's like when you have those other pieces,
yeah.
it falls into its place, and you know those the little like string buzzing on the fret doesn't really like overshadow everything else. It you know it's just there, and that you don't really notice it, and it's like you kind of have to remember that it's a piece of the puzzle in that way. It's like it's very easy to look at something isolated by itself and be able to just absolutely destroy it and pick it apart, but you have to remember that there's like all these other layers that are going to go into it, and then it's going to be okay. It's just a blip in the
Yeah.
pan at that point.
Yeah. Yeah. You're baking a cake, and yeah, you should always listen to things in context. And I think you just have to ask yourself two questions: Does it feel good? Does it sound good? If
Yeah.
if the answer is yes to both of those, move on. You don't need to do 37 vocal takes. you know?
Yeah. Because then it's just more to work with on the back end, and
Yeah.
that's no fun. You don't want to go through 37 vocal takes, right?
No, no. And I actually I set myself up so that I couldn't do that to myself, and I forced myself to get an 8-track digital recorder that only had an undo button. So I could just do a take and then punch in. That was it. I had to make a decision immediately to say this is good or this is bad. Um, and as much of a pain in the butt as that has been for me, um, it was my way of creating a check and balance for my own perfectionism.
Fair enough. Yeah, fair enough. It sometimes you need to put those guardrails up and just do the thing.
Yeah,
Um, sometimes you just need to, you know, take guitar lessons for a month and just see what happens, right?
yeah.
What is your question for next week's artist?
Um, my question for next week's artist is um, on those days when you wake up and you think I don't want to be creative, I don't want to be musical, um, you know, I should give this up. Uh, what do you tell yourself? What do you do to get through that and to just keep going?
Okay, I like that.
Hopefully, that's not too intense. But in my experience, it's a very common feeling amongst musicians. I think we may be the most self doubting people on the planet.
Yeah, there's like a word or a phrase for it where it's like
Imposter syndrome.
no, like a it's like a like almost like is it like a prisoner of art or something like that, where it's like
Oh, interesting.
you're as much as some days you're like, okay, I'm done with this, it's like you can't just not do it, like
Yeah,
that's it's in your like soul, like there's
yeah.
no not doing this, it's you're stuck.
I actually love that. I feel like that all the time. That's amazing.
What do you think sets you apart from other independent artists?
um, I uh think the fact that I don't think of myself as an independent artist. I'm just a guitar player who is writing music and recording music uh because I feel like I never got the right band together, I guess. And that's not a it's not, I don't mean that as an insult to all the bands that I've been in, but I always wanted to really have that kind of Lennon and McCartney relationship in a group, and but I really just want to be George. I really just want to kind of have somebody bring in these songs and I can just kind of play them and put solos to them and do all the fun bits and everything. But in order to get to that, my way of getting there has been to become a songwriter so that I can record my own written music.
Yeah, I mean, if the opportunity isn't just like given to you or isn't like in front of you, you just kind of have to take it yourself. So you're just kind of
Yeah,
taking your own opportunity to, create that space that you want to exist in, you know?
yeah, yeah. That's really how I got here, and luckily I found that I do enjoy writing songs now, but it's taken several years.
I think I remembered what the phrase was. It wasn't actually like prisoner of art, it was the labor of love.
Mm,
And so it's like,
yeah,
that passion, but it's like, okay, this is, it's hard work, frustrating work, but there's no other way.
yeah,
That line just connected for me. I don't know what did it, but sometimes the words, buffer for a while and then they come
sure,
through.
sure.
So, but yeah, no, and I think what sets me apart as an independent artist is that I don't think of myself as an independent artist is probably one of my favorite answers to that. That's that's too good. But you're doing it, whether you think of it that way or not, you're still doing it. You're writing the
I'm doing
songs,
it.
doing the things.
I'm doing the things. Yes,
Yeah.
I write music and I play music for people.
What impact do you want to have with your music and with your artistry?
um, I I really, oh man, I don't mean this to sound selfish, but I don't. I think the best that I can really hope for is I really just want to write songs that I enjoy, and I hope that other people enjoy them as well. But it's I don't know. It really, I guess, really at the heart of it, it is quite selfish. I'm just writing stuff that I think is cool and that I like.
I mean, it might, you can look at it that way, but you can also see it in a way of like, I'm of the mind that like music, it's every song is for somebody in a way of like, like the human experience is pretty universal, just with different timelines, different characters, different, levels of the plot, like that kind of thing. Like we all experience a lot of the same just life things.
Sure.
And you can only do like, yes, there will never be, we'll never run out of new music and there will always be something new and always a new sound and, always somebody new doing something new. That's just the way that things go. But at the same time, like there's a lot of this is just a product of all of these different things. And so like even if you're doing it like from the standpoint of I'm doing this for me, there's also going to be somebody on the receiving end of that who's like this song feels like it was made for me because that's just how like connected we are as people.
Yeah.
And just, and so, yeah, you can look at it in a way of like, I'm just kind of doing my own thing here and having a good time doing it. But that's whether you see it that way or not, or like feel it that way or intend for it to be that way. Somebody's going to find that and be like, okay, like this guy gets it. I am buying what he's selling here. Like I am on this John Marland vibe.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. I agree with that.
So,
I think that's well
uh,
put.
I try. I try to find the words. Sometimes they
Yeah.
come,
Yeah.
sometimes they don't, as we've experienced in the last few
Sure.
minutes. And I think then that brings us to the final question, which is ultimately why music?
um, because it's the best thing there is. It's so magical. It's so fantastically intangible. You know, you can see a painting, you can touch a painting, you can sure you might not be able to go home and do a copy of the Mona Lisa, but you can see the brush strokes. You cannot do any of that with music when you're listening to it, right? If you're live, sure, you can see the folks moving their fingers up and down a guitar, whatever. But I just remember like just the absolute wonder of all of it. You know, putting a cassette with tape into a cassette player and having the sound come out that is invisible, and yet it's so incredible. I just think it's so mysterious. You don't know where it comes from, and then as you learn more and more about it, you kind of you lose that, and then you discover a whole new way to appreciate music because it's actually very scientific, very mathematical. You know, it's at the end of the day, it's you're combining vibrations and all of that is interpreted, you know, by a relatively similar set of eardrums throughout the population. Um, yeah, it's just awesome, and it's an infinite well. It's a black hole. You know, you never reach master level. There's never an end. There's always a new place to go, a new thing to learn, something new to listen to. Um, it's the gift that keeps on giving.
Yeah, I mean, they say you'll never write your best song because you'll just keep going, and like you'll never know when it's your best song. You never know
Yeah,
when that moment's gonna be, and so you just keep doing the thing.
yeah, I love that. I love that. It's a great saying and very true.
Yeah. Well, I think that brings us to the end of this episode of the Why Music podcast. You can check back again next week for another conversation with another independent artist. Thanks for listening.